Hello! Today we're going to be looking at this product from AKK. This is called the Alpha10. It is a bloody huge VTX, and it's not just huge in dimensions, it's huge in terms of power. This can do up to 10 watts of power, which is slightly ridiculous, which is why I said, hey, send it over, I'll have a look at it. I like the ridiculous. Now, instantly, when I thought about how to test this, I'm like, well, if I put it in a flying thing, it's a bit pointless, because on 200 milliwatts on a decent VTX, I run out of field and I don't know what to do then. So I thought if I put it in a ground vehicle, that's a much more harder test. And we've done this before. We've got in here the a Rush FPV VTX, and this went several hundred meters in quite tricky terrain because it was being blocked by trees and stuff. And I thought if this is one thing that would easily do better than that, this is it. So we can put it through very harsh conditions, whack the power up and see what happens, and that would be a good indication of what you can get. In the air, I'm sure it'll go a very, very long way, but I thought I'd do this on the ground. It's got a very wide range of frequencies, so they also have these special things called the AKK tube antennas, which you can get. However, this is too big for that, and it works off at least 12 volts, so we need a bigger car. Say hello to my little friend. This car was actually supposed to be revealed in a different video where I'm talking about using a 4G system for infinite range. Now, unfortunately, infinite range turns out to be not quite so infinite if your phone signal isn't very good, and I had real problems trying it in my garden. I'm going to go back to that one, but there's a big reveal in it, so when you watch that one, if it ever comes out, pretend you didn't see this bit and it'll all be a surprise. This is the 4G system. I basically mounted it on this wooden plank. And I've extended things like to hold bigger batteries and multiple batteries. So what I'm going to do is get another plank and mount it in a similar way. You see, we just need to put the FPV camera in the right place so we can see. And we'd have probably the VTX maybe on the roof or something just to make sure it can keep cool. But I thought to myself, I want to know how far I've gone properly. I'm going to need a GPS or something to find out why. But I didn't want the complexity of building something like iNav to do it. So I thought I could go back 10 years and use something like this. This is a micro minim OSD. And I've done videos before ages ago where I've used this as basically a standalone OSD, and it would show your GPS coordinates if you plug the right stuff in and things. But I thought then I wouldn't be able to control the VTX via smart audio. So then I came up with the idea of like, could I just use a flight controller but not do anything with it? Can I use Betaflight just as an OSD? The answer is I don't know. So I built myself a test rig. What we've got here, using high-tech materials like blue tack to put everything down, is a camera, an F7 flight controller running Betaflight, a Rush FPV VTX, an ELRS receiver, that's the one I would use in the car, and a GPS. So I thought, let's test this out. Let's see if we can just literally set it up. So we're going to need an arm mode, but that should be about it. After that, I'm ignoring it. Let's see if it works first. Well, our first test went quite well until we got a throttle runaway. We went out, we got the meters going up. We've just gone aside now, so the satellite's going crazy. But why we're getting a throttle runaway is anyone's business. I mean, we can obviously rearm it, and then it's okay again, but how do we stop that? So this is called runaway takeoff prevention. I don't know why I kept calling it throttle runaway, but this is a setting in Betaflight that's on by default and we can just turn off. So I turned it off and I gave things another shot. Okay, just out here on a walk, and things seem better. We're like 170 odd meters away. We've got a home arrow. We've got our speed, which is going crazy. Now we're just losing satellites. Yeah, it's working okay. I think we've got something. Now, if you're looking at this setup and thinking, why didn't he put this on? Mainly because it needs 12 volts. This is all running off, well, that's actually running direct off the battery. But I want to be able to run this on a 2-cell battery. So what I've got is this. Not sure if it's going to work. It is a DC to DC step-up adapter. The idea here is we bring sort of 7 volts up here and we put 12 volts out there. This needs 12 volts at 2.6 amps to run, which is quite a lot. This says it handles 5 amps,
Not sure if that's input or output, but I'm going to wire this up and check it out. One thing about this, you notice it has 2 ground and 2 powers, which say they both need to be connected. I think this is literally the size of the wire they're using is a bit dodgy if you're going to put 2.6 amps through it and they like, oh, put twice in and then it won't melt as easily. But anyway, I'm going to wire this up, see if it's going to work, and then I can fathom out how I'm going to connect it all. Okay, 2S into step-up converter into Alpha10, which is, I think is running on A8 at first power. This is an actual FPV war crime in wiring. I've twisted together some wires just so I can double check it runs everything. Everything is running, whoops, everything is running fine. So this means I can run this all from a single battery. That's pretty cool so far to say it's running at 1 watt. So yeah, now it's time to actually get this thing sorted out how I'm going to install it on the car. Well, after wiring this guy up and getting ready to see where the camera was, I plugged it in and I had a power problem, but it's not where you imagine. If I plug in one of these 5200 2Ss, now you will see that the converter comes on, the VTX comes on, but this guy doesn't come on. And why not? If you look at this, it says 7 to 40 volts in. I'm giving it a fully charged 8.4 battery, should be fine, but doesn't work. And if you're thinking it's probably the wiring, if we unplug the VTX from this, and now we plug in this 4S, like that, up lights the flight controller, and then it puts out 5 volts to the camera and everything powers that way. The reason I had to unplug the VTX at this point is it's going through a step-up converter and I'd be putting in more than I'm trying to step up to, which is a problem. So it's either change to flight controller, which would be a pain because I've got that all configured, or go with a quick 2 battery config, in which case I just take out the converter, wire it up directly, and I just run all the electronics on 4S apart from the ESC and the receiver that would work from 2S, which I think I'm going to do next. Running on the 4S, which is doable.
AKK additionally sent me over the 5 watt version of this VTX, so I thought I'd install that and have a quick test drive in the garden. Now this seemed to be looking okay, apart from the fact that you'll notice we get a core temperature flashing up occasionally, and this turned out to be a problem. Not from the VTX overheating as I expected it might do, that was completely cool, but from the flight controller itself overheating, which was a right pain. In order to change the power of the VTX, realising that I couldn't easily get into the menu because I had a ground radio, so what I did, I set up the power of the VTX to change based on the position of the pot I had, which seems to work quite well.
So because the flight controller shut down because it was overheating, I've managed to find this little 5 volt fan which runs off the flight controller itself. It's not quite the right size, so one of the screws fitted in and we've got some tape just holding it, so it's very bodgy. Now I've run this up here without sort of any airflow or anything for a good 10 minutes and we didn't get any warnings about the sort of core temperature, so I think that's good to take out on a proper test now.
Welcome to the forest, and this is where I ran a car last time. I started over there. The reason I haven't today is because this mud and puddle, although it's been quite nice weather recently, it takes like months for this stuff to dry out, so I'm not sure how the path's going to be. We're basically going to drive it up there, see how far we can get. You can see how overgrown everything is as well, so it'll be a real test. Here is the truck, and we're using the 5 watt version to test it out, and I'm not sure how long the battery for the car will last either. Receiver wise, we're using the normal stuff. I got the HD0 goggles with the Menace RC stuff on the analog side of things, and we of course got the MT12 for driving this. So yeah, let's switch it on, go, see how far we get. Okay, so let's get driving. I'm fast forwarding this first bit a little until we hit the first bit where we had a slight problem. You will notice, because this is the 5 watt version, the lowest power is actually 25 milliwatts, and we get a reasonable distance on 25 milliwatts. When it gets a bit fuzzy, I put it up to 1 watt and then we continue once again, and we keep trundling along. Basically it feels like I've been going for sort of years at this point, and it's like less than 100 meters. It's such a difference being on the ground. And one of the problems is that we're not going in a straight line, so we've got no actual line of sight. Already at this point, we've got trees and bushes in front of us, and it just kind of gets worse and worse as we go. So I'll go to live commentary that I recorded whilst driving now.
We'll try. Well, yeah, that picture's starting to get a little dodgy. What we got here? This looks a little bit wet. We're going to up the power again. All the way up to 5 watt there, and we're not getting a picture through. I think we might have found the limit here. Let me just try pushing on a little bit further through that mud. What happens if we move it down again? 3 watts. Oh, no, 3 watts no good. 5 watt just about gets us something, but I don't think it's going to hold. We're at 200 meters. You can see how much stuff we've got in the way of us though. It's pretty intense. We're onto the bridge, and I'm not really trusting it to go any further, I have to say. So let's turn it around. Because it's not looking like it's going to get much further through all these woods and green and gubbins basically. The LRS is holding up beautifully, of course.
So yeah, we were blocked by all this greenery, so I thought I'll zip this back quickly and I'll try and get a little bit more of an open road, although there are no straight roads. They've all got curves in them, but we'll give it a go. Okay, so this is a gravel road. I'm really glad I've got this car, because when I used a sort of smaller, like 1/16 scale or something, it was just bouncing about like a crazy thing. This rides over it a lot better. Still quite bumpy, but not as bad. Now, this road is more wide open, so we haven't got the instant trees surrounding us, but it does curve round to the right there and start cutting us off fairly quickly. So we're still dealing with not enough of a straight road to take this as far as we want to go. But let's get to the point where we had the problem and join my own live commentary.
Okay, we're doing okay for here. We're turning a bit more of a corner, so we've gone to the right twice now, which means we're going to be facing all those trees on the right of us, cutting us off like this. Yeah. So will whopping the power up help at all? 3 watts. Not really. 5 watts. Nah. Unfortunately, you can see this big bunch of trees there, and we've already gone round to the right a bit already, so that's going to screw us over. So it was just over 300 meters until trees blocked us. Boo.
And this was just over 300 meters, because if you notice there, when I was at my start position, it had 31 meters. This is because I hadn't set it up so it would take a new home position when I rearmed, and I was only 31 meters from the previous position. To be honest, this is much of what I expected from 5.8. Although this thing will go for miles and miles and miles in the air where you've got line of sight, with 5.8, if you put a blockage in front of it, it doesn't really matter if it's at 1 watt, 10 watts or whatever, you won't get through a solid object. And when we putting like stacks of trees in front of us and things, we are just getting blocked. Now perhaps you could do slightly better with very powerful and directional antennas to pick up tiny bits of what you've got, or perhaps reflected bits of video signal bouncing off trees and stuff. But from a sort of general point of view, if there's something in the way of the ground, then it will get blocked and you won't get any picture whatsoever at all. So I'll just show one more piece of footage I took on a day with the 5 watt before I move on to the 10 watt adapter. This is where I normally fly my whoops. There is a trail that goes through the forest, and it looks reasonably easy to pick up when you're flying something, because you can look down and see stuff. It's just an illustration of how difficult it is to see anything, because as soon as you get sort of grass and it's a bit sort of, is this a trail, is this not a trail, I don't know, and you just sort of carry on quite blindly. The other problem I've had throughout the day, and I don't know if you've noticed, is the home arrow. The home arrow seems off, and I'm not sure why. I've brought it back and looked at it, and my flight controller is facing the right direction. If I lift the car up and rotate it around, you can see in Betaflight that everything is rotating in the right way. It seems to suggest it thinks it's pointing in a slightly different direction than it's going, so the arrow is always somewhat off. And this turned out to be a problem, because when I actually came to turn round here, I didn't recognise anything. I've just done a turnaround, having sort of reached where it looks like it goes onto the main path, and this is where it's like, okay, well, I can't see where the path is anymore. I think it's in this direction. I can't rely on the home arrow because that appears to be completely off. So I'm trying to follow a trail, but the trail doesn't look like a trail, and I don't sort of recognise, you know, these particular bits of wood and stuff hanging around here. And basically I get slightly hopelessly lost. So I thought about just, you know, looking at how much the meters tick down, because I think that bit's working fine. It just can't figure out my direction. But rather than just, you know, getting hopelessly lost in thick woods, I decided to stop and just walk up and try and find it, which I thought was a much better idea, given that I could get myself in all sorts of weird places. Well, it's amazing how little off I was. I'm there, that's the trail, but because of that home arrow being a bit crap, I got a bit lost. So we'll be definitely looking at that and improving it. Welcome to the field. I was looking for a long time for a sort of an open area which is long and I could test, and after some words with Graham the farmer, Nikki the wife, we figure we go from here. This is where the entrance to the field is, and we can go from here through that gate, hopefully to the middle field, and then through the further gate to the end field, which if we can get to the end we think is about, and at that point the GoPro gives up. We think about 800 metres if we get all the way through the field. There are bushes and stuff in the way, so a good test. Here's the big guy, ready to go. The grass here is quite long, but I think it should get through it. It's nice we haven't had to walk very far, so yeah, let's get cracking, let's see what happens. So one thing I neglected to mention there is that I swapped the 5 watt out for the 10 watt. So the minimum power you have is one, I think it goes 1, 3, 5, 7, 10. And I've still got that on the rotary dial, and I'm just starting to drive around here, and I'm like, ooh, can we get through this grass? And I end up basically doing a circle to myself before continuing on. Basically I was told that it's been cut on the sort of right hand side if we head through the hedgerow there, so I'll speed that up. So this is as speeded up. It's quite bumpy. Even though this is a big car and can handle the lumps and bumps, it still has some. And basically I'm going around the edge of the field trying to find the gate to go through. Now the problem was, when I got through the end of the gate, the next field was a little bit more tricky, because what we had here is it had been cut but it hadn't been baled, so we had great big lumps of grass and really loose grass lying on top. And somewhere in here there's a path cut through. Again, when you're so close to the ground, it's so difficult to see stuff. I'll zip through this bit of me trying to find my way through the field quite quickly until we get to the gate to the next field, because this is where it becomes a little bit more tricky. We've got what I thought the grass was cut here, but actually there is just a bit cut to the side. So I start looking at how to get through stuff and realise I can't before I head down the side. And at this point obviously we've got a couple of hedgerows in the way, and so our signal starts going down. So I try and have a bit of an experiment going to 3 watts, 5 watts. It's really difficult to say if it improves, because when it stays still we get a slightly better picture than when it bumps around. I think it's a little bit better, but essentially we can't really brute force our way through solid objects that much. I mean, hedgerows aren't solid, but they're quite dense and we're quite close to them, and that really cuts off quite a lot. I was meandering about a while here trying to figure out my bearings, and I tried to get back to what I thought was the path to try and get myself over to where I'm heading. And this is the reason I was trying to head back. I'm in a worse position now, and I'm on 10 watts, and I'm still getting a pretty bad picture. So I'm thinking, yeah, get back. But then I get to this point and I can go forward to an extent and backwards to an extent, and then it stops. I can even sort of turn around on it, but I just can't get free. So I figured there must be something the car's somehow caught on, which is somehow unable to drive off, which is weird, but I had to say, let's stop it here. I'm going to have to go and retrieve the car manually. Here's the problem. This is round the drive shaft and it's completely blocking what you can do. So let's get rid of that. Okay, welcome to plan B. I'm at the other end of the end field, and it's had this thing cut along it, but they haven't done the main thing yet. So what I was going to try and do is reset, try and go down here, along through that gate. If I need to, I can move a bit further over here to give line of sight and try and get all the way back from where I originally started. See what happens. Okay, so we're off again, and I'm a lot more sort of aware now of how bad those loose piles of grass can be. I actually drove from where it got stuck down to here, just line of sight, because it's a heavy car and I couldn't be bothered to lift it, and I ended up driving over one of them and getting the front wheels completely stuck. So I'm being really, really careful about how I get back there. But let's speed this up a bit because it all looks the same. When we're going down here, we've got the nice trees that tell us we're heading in the right direction. Midfield, this is really tricky to navigate, and I'll show you some clips in a minute. This is essentially where I was trying to get to last time when I got held up, and of course I was stood on the other side of this hedgerow and another hedgerow in between, so I was getting a very bad picture there. This is absolutely fine at 1 watt so far. I'm slightly worried that the long grass that's still there is going to block me slightly, but what I figure is as I go further, the picture should perhaps go worse and then improve, because the angle to the car will kind of go over the top of the grass and not cause a problem. What's happening here is I honestly couldn't remember where the gate was. I had real trouble finding the gate. It's up here somewhere, but it took me a while to find. So here it is, and at the point of me going through the gate, what I decided to do is basically move out to the middle of the field I was in to try and line myself up with the gate. It's still the same distance away, it's just better lined up. I figured I'd give myself the best chance there. In the meantime, I'm just trying to get parked while I do that. And that's me sorted out, getting a better position. So I've pretty much got line of sight through the gate into this field, and hence I've been able to just keep the power at 1 watt and go. Now this was a place where I got very disorientated. I'll just speed up till we get to this point. Now all the way down this field I was struggling to keep the path in view. It's not exactly a path. It would look like it if you're a human, but it's much harder to find it when you're down at that level. Now what I've done here is I've managed to overshoot where the gate was, and I'm just not sure where I am. I'm like, okay, well there's a hedge there and a hedge there, but quite honestly I don't know which way I'm facing. I took the guesstimate that this was the, looking from the direction I was in, the sort of the furthest away left hand side, and I just have to drive down here until I manage to figure out where a gap was. But it is just so hard when you're, especially in this sort of environment where everything's pretty much taller than you, you're on the floor and you've really got no proper view of what's happening. It's very, very interesting, and compared to flying in the sky, it is a level of difficulty that's up. I can see people like driving around the street and stuff would not have a problem, but for me I had a problem. But here it is, here's the gate. What I elected to do here, instead of going around the side because I didn't know how much signal I would lose against the hedge, is just go straight over the more bumpy grass. I think we end up turning the power up a bit here to see how it goes, because you can see we're getting a little bit of interference, and that's me right up to 10 watt, and you can see the interference kind of go, so it's possible to get slightly better view there. So let's zip along once again. What I did do is I recorded live commentary into my DVR as I was doing this, and for people that are really interested, and I've already shared this with my patrons, I will give links to the full videos where you can see my uncut footage of the half an hour of driving, but for this YouTube video I figure it's a bit long. And we're just coming up on the gate that I originally started at, and you can see our distance we've got to 662 meters, so not quite 800 meters, but not bad. And you can see here, because that angle has changed, I can just put the power down to 1 watt and I get a fairly good picture. What I decided to do going back is risk driving down the hedgerow and see how much picture I lost. And even though I was kind of blocked by 2 lots of hedgerow, coming down this main section until I turned where the actual hedgerow was to get to the gate was pretty good. Over here the picture started to go, so I started to whack the power up, and being this close to the obstruction didn't seem to help me this much. It was quite hard going. When we turn this 90-degree angle, we seem to be in the worst possible way. We're up to 10 watts here, and you can see the picture is difficult to drive. Difficult, but fortunately not impossible, so we had enough image to carry on, although I hit the hedge a lot, and I knew as long as I just carried on towards the middle of the field, eventually I would get to the gate, and the gate would bring me within line of sight of myself. That's not to say I didn't get somewhat disorientated on the way, and I was like, is that the gate? Nope, that's just a hedge. Let's carry on and we'll be fine. And you can just see the gate kind of ghosting in there. It's pretty tricky. It's not an easy drive, but fortunately I knew what to look for, and you see here how the picture comes good when we get better line of sight back, and even at 1 watt it's not bad at all. So I'm sorry if the speeded up footage is hard to watch, but I just wanted to say, yeah, like, I actually did it, but I know, you know, not many people want to watch it in its entirety, so we'll speed through it. What I will do is show you the part where I originally set off from, which is here. This is where I set off and drove down, and when I got to that first gate, this is what I did. I moved over to the middle of the field to give myself better line of sight. As it was, I could have stood here to start with, and we got a fairly good picture all the way along. So I wanted to sort of drive back and just see if I could make it like in one position without having to change where I was. And yeah, it has worked. We have managed to get back to myself. At this point it was really weird because I heard this trundling noise. I was like, what's that? And I thought, oh yeah, it's the truck. Unlike quads, of course, you don't hear these things unless they're very much on top of you, and like with a quad you can hear it forever just making a lot of noise, but not this one. Okay, so let's see if we did get much in there. We've got obviously some bits here, little bits here. How are we doing underneath? Yeah, we brought some grass with us and twigs and all sorts of stuff. Wow, it is loose grass is not a friend of an RC car, even if it can like handle quite tricky conditions. I'm sure we were getting impacted. If you look at the amount of stuff we've got here and here and here, not as bad as last time, but that would definitely have been dragging a bit, wouldn't it? So yeah, I'll get this cleaned up and we'll go. Well, whilst it was quite good fun to test this and the 5 watt version out and drive the car around, I don't think it told me anything I didn't know, but I felt it important to show what the results were, because often there's this perception that if you've got like a bad signal, you should just throw more power at it, and that's not always the case. In fact, it very rarely is. And one thing about 5.8 is its penetration ability is not very good. So if you've got a solid object in the way, or a series of not so solid objects in the way but at a further distance, your signal will get blocked, and you can wind the power up all you like and it's not going to help you. Now that's the ground situation, but what about the air? Exactly what could you do with something like this? Well, to put it in perspective, Wes Vardy, who's one of the Express LRS developers, wanted to know how far ELRS would take him. Would it take him to 100 kilometers? And the answer was yes. And he was using a 2.5 watt VTX, And because the way the inverse square law, I think that's it, will work, basically you need to quadruple the power in order to go double the distance. This is 10, which is 4 times more powerful than 2.5 watts, so this should go double the distance. So will this go to 200 kilometers? Well, 2 things about that video. First is he had pretty good video up to about 70-80 kilometers, then it sort of cut out for a while, but when he got to 100k he was able to get some sort of patchy stuff back in. But this wasn't just using a regular antenna, this was like a parabolic dish antenna, which is like another level of the receiving equipment. That's really going to intensely amplify the received signal you get back. So might this do 200? Surely it'd do 100k easy. Maybe, if you've got the right receiving stuff. Although a few words of warning about what it would take to go like 100k or 200k. Now, despite what these flat earth muppets would have you believe, Earth is curved, and so as you fly out you will disappear over the horizon if you don't go a certain distance. So if you wanted to go 200 kilometers with this, if you could get the signal back, you'd have to be at a distance of about 3,100 and something meters, which is quite high. At 100 kilometers it's not so bad, 784 meters, so like around about the 1,000 would do you good. Of course, that breaks all sorts of laws, which brings us to the other problem with 10 watts of power. I don't think there's any country I can think of that says, yeah, have as much power as you want, you can do what you like. Maybe certain radio hams in certain countries can put out this sort of wattage. Can't here. Although interestingly, there's different rules for ground vehicles versus flying vehicles in the UK, where you can actually put out more power if you're on the ground. Not this much, I hasten to add, but more than you can legally fly with. So who is this for? Maybe it's not about going 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers. Maybe it's like being able to fly 10 to 20 kilometers and not have to go like special on your equipment. So could you fly 10 or 20 kilometers on just like a regular circular polarized antenna and perhaps like a mini patch like the normal sort we've had on Fat Sharks and stuff? Maybe. Don't know, haven't tested it. I'm not really a long range guy. I mean, to be fair, you don't just get them in 10. There's a 10, there's the 5, which I've got. There's also an 8 to go in the middle and slightly below a 4. So there's all sorts you can go with, depending what you want to do. But as I've yet to really be able to outfly what I would normally do on sort of 200 milliwatts, it's slightly overkill for me, but it is there if you want it and you want to start doing some long range shenanigans. That bit's up to you. Obviously check your local laws and stuff if you believe in those sort of things, and I didn't endorse you doing it. If you're wondering what's next for the car, well, hopefully at some point I will finish that 4G video if I can actually find somewhere I can use it. But in terms of experimenting more as a general FPV car, what I'm going to do is putting a 1.2 gig video system, because those lower frequencies should be much better at being able to penetrate through obstacles. Nothing can like go through solid stuff all the way, but that is much better than 5.8 for that sort of thing. So I want to repeat the test basically, see if I can get a better sort of picture from it. Anyway, well, many thanks to AKK for sending this in for testing. Hope that's helpful. Until next time, bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.